Where's the dog food? The dog food! They took the dog food! Before we begin this review of James Gunn's adaptation of Superman, I want to share with you something funny. I don't think you can make it out properly on this ticket, but when I purchased the ticket to see James Gunn's Superman in View Cinema, I got the ticket seat of K9. Seat K9! You can't make it up. When that was being given to me, I just said to the lady at the counter, "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" I don't think she didn't intend to do that, but that's really funny. That's really funny. Anyway, on review of Superman. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, and he thinks he'd blow our mind. I think I butchered that song. So, James Gunn has been well known for his contributions to superhero filmmaking, i.e., his biggest accomplishment being the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, previously, the Guardians of the Galaxy were such an obscure group of characters that you really got to give it to James Gunn for making them popular again after so much obscurity. It's evidential that James Gunn clearly has a passion for superhero comic in film adaptation. After all, not only has he made the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, but he's also made a far superior Suicide Squad movie to, well, the other Suicide Squad movie. Of course, not everything James Gunn was forged into gold, mind you. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is definitely the weakest entry in that trilogy, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad entry at all, far from it. He was still able to pull at people's heartstrings. It would seem that after some disputes between himself and the executives at Marvel, James Gunn has left there to work for DC. I mean, after all, he has made a successful DC movie with Suicide Squad. Surely he could do successful in other areas. Now, when initial teasers for Superman were released, people were initially skeptical if he could actually do it. After all, it's pretty much well known that James Gunn specializes in the kind of stories where a group of misfits come together, need to put their differences aside in order to defeat a greater evil. He specializes in that with the Guardians of the Galaxy and with the Suicide Squad. It would seem that anywhere outside of his comfort zone would lead to an incomplete picture. But at the same time, he still has that clear passion for superhero comics. So, what of this movie then? There was a lot of heated discussions, a lot of fears and speculations rounding up, but eventually the film released, and there was a whole myriad of mixed receptions, shall we say. Some people loved it, others hated it, others thought it was somewhere in between. So, what do I make of the Superman movie as adapted by James Gunn? It's not a terrible movie. It's actually a legitimately fun movie, but I wouldn't call it a masterpiece either. Suppose I should explain myself. This version of Superman is set 3 years into Superman's career, and when we catch up with him in the story, this is the first time he's experienced an actual loss in a battle after all those years of being an absolutely awesome superhero. It would appear that Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, has finally got the best of Superman, played by David Corenswet, I believe the name is. Superman has to find a way to take down his arch-enemy Lex Luthor before he makes a major political power move. And in order to do so, Superman has to team up with his loyal and unruly dog, Krypto, the Justice Gang. Yes, that is literally what they call the Justice League in this movie. Justice Gang, very James Gunn, as well as Lois Lane and the team at Daily Planet. Together, they must come together to try to take down Lex Luthor before he does something really bad. Can they do so? Oh, also there's so many other plot threads that are interwoven together into this otherwise fairly straightforward plot, which leads to my biggest critique for this movie. It's very unfocused, in that there's not really a core thematic plotline to coherently follow along other than the simplistic story of Superman needs to beat Lex Luthor. James Gunn tries to throw in a fairly controversial plot twist in which Superman's parents from the planet Krypton actually intended Superman to be some kind of dominant overlord with a harem and stuff like that. And that doesn't go very well with him and the public. But his wrestling with what he expected of his parents and how that relates to him, that's never really explored in a full enough depth to be significant to the overall plot. And you'd think it would, because this is such a major turn for Superman's character, and they do talk about it, but only briefly. Okay, this is going to be a bit of an extreme example, but that's kind of like the mention of cancer in Tommy Wiseau's The Room. It's the kind of thing where a character brings it up, and it never really contributes itself to the plot in any meaningful way to the overall story ever again. I know, severe example, but I think you get the point. That, as well as the fact that the film tries to cram in so many different side characters in there, and not many of them are given enough time to be fully fleshed out. This film could have done with being somewhat longer to delve more into the characters, as well as give more focus on a plot line of some kind. So the lack of focus is this film's biggest weakness, but at the same time, it's very clear that this movie does share the same optimism as the source material, unlike a lot of what we've gotten used to over the years, which is a very refreshing take if you ask me. What James Gunn's adaptation gets right is that sense of optimism, that sense of hope that is associated with Superman, who is a pop culture messiah figure in the symbolic sense. That optimism emanates throughout the movie, and James Gunn never really delves into an overly cynical take, and that optimism bleeds over into its characters. The heart of this movie is definitely in the right place, and the characterization for all the characters featured here, even if some development for side characters are a bit rushed, it still feels quite genuine. For example, it's so refreshing that Lois Lane doesn't feel like some narcissistic pushover girl boss. She actually is strong, independent, and actually challenges Superman in a constructive way. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is an example of how you actually write strong female characters. You know, actual strong female characters. There were certain vibes I was really liking from this movie. Like, I like how the opening had this sort of Top Gun Maverick kind of vibe with the setup text and stuff like that. And it's really very clever of James Gunn to do that kind of retro style storytelling of exposition so that we don't have to go through yet another origin story kind of movie. We've been through enough origin story type ordeals, even with Zack Snyder's version. But with that said, that also leads to the critique that this movie feels like it's kind of throwing us in the middle of the action without giving us that much of an explanation. I mean, on the one hand, we can understand what's going on, but at the same time, that lack of focus leads to a sense of things being somewhat rushed. Perhaps if the opening and the middle took more time to establish its characters, somehow this probably could have worked a little bit better. I mean, I've heard it said that it's never really delved further enough as to why this specific version of Lex Luthor doesn't like Superman. I mean, it's implied, but never really fully explored. Is it the bird? Is it the plane? Oh my! I think it's a plane! There could have been more time with Superman's implications on how Clark Kent was brought up by, well, the Kent family, and how that correlates with how he relates to the world and to humanity, and by extension, himself in the humanity sense, as this film is trying to declare. I mean, all these themes of hope and fitting in with humanity are there, and they're great, and they're warmly welcomed. It's just that they're not fully developed enough to feel significant, which is rather unfortunate because this movie's heart is in the right place. There's a lot of spectacularly heroic moments with Superman with some really cool effects, like this one scene where Superman rushes in to save a girl from all this debris. The practical effects look really convincing. Or other scenes where like Superman goes out of his way to save people's lives, even going as far as to save a squirrel. It's just the kind of heroic actions that are guaranteed to put a smile on your face, much like Deku and All Might in My Hero Academia. It's that kind of optimism. There's some great action scenes, some great spectacle, some really cool visual effects, and the humor can be hit or miss. Some of the jokes can be painfully Whedonized in the negative sense. Others are quite ingenuitively creative, much like some of the fight scenes as well. And the characters are really well cast, I'd say. I can't think of a single character that was miscast. David Corenswet does a great job of getting into shape and portraying a very human, relatable Superman trying to fit in with humanity. Nicholas Hoult, unlike Jesse Eisenberg, sorry Jesse. Jesse! Nicholas Hoult does a great job of portraying Lex Luthor, this ruthless businessman who's such a narcissist and yet still allows himself to be calm under pressure when the going gets tough at times. A good example of this would be the trending "Where's the dog?" scene. That's been trending online. Cue John Wick joke here. Where were the other dogs going? Where's the drugs? So overall, James Gunn's adaptation of Superman is by no means perfect, but it's still a breath of fresh air, however flawed it may be, and if someone were to invite me to go out to see the movie again, I wouldn't mind. I know others found this movie disappointing, and there's other people who don't like it. I can understand why people don't like it, whereas on the other hand, there are people who really like it, to the point where there's really good ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, but no one really trusts Rotten Tomatoes these days, which I completely understand. So I wanted to see the movie for myself, just to give an authentic opinion, however you make of that. So what's my overall estimation of James Gunn's adaptation of Superman? I'm probably going to give it a 7.3 out of 12. I'd probably give it just a few bonus points for having the right kind of optimism, which is a breath of fresh air, but otherwise, it's a very unfocused movie whose heart is in the right place, and I don't know if this is gonna, save the superhero genre as people have been hyping it up to be, but I had fun with it for what it was. What did you all think of James Gunn's Superman? Let me know in the comments down below. We'll get a conversation started. You will believe that a Lego man can fly. They called him Baba Yaga. Tune in next time for a review of K-pop Demon Hunters. Until then, ScotsThinker signing out.